morning everybody, and welcome back to another very special video here on the channel, where today we'll be taking a look at not just a digital mock but a real life mock of Link from The Legend of Zelda, this time in his green uniform. This mock is inspired and heavily constructed similar to Brixter's beautiful Breath of the Wild champion Tunic Link, which he has on Ideas. So as an Ideas project, go support that, check out the video, wonderful guy, great video, and obviously amazing concept, or else I wouldn't have done this. But one thing that I thought I could do differently would be to go and take the Link model and put it into his normal green tunic seen across most of the games. So I'm going to point out a couple of the key features here, talk about the inspiration, and then we can go and take a close-up look at the posability and accessories for him. So let's start the spin, and let me start talking. So clearly you can see here we've got sword and shield, but we've also got a couple of other accessories, as this build is directly inspired by Skyward Sword. A couple of the interesting points to point out about particularly the unique stuff to Skyward Sword is stuff like the actual tunic design, so what colours are chosen, where the belt is and stuff like that. Obviously the shield is the iron shield from Skyward Sword, and the fact that it's in green uniform, the height of the boots, and also the earrings are all specific to Skyward Sword, with the earrings being the Fire Shield earrings. And the base, which we'll be taking a look at in a separate video, but is highly detailed, and he is attached just there into a ginormous cheese slope mosaic, is sort of based off the Fire Sanctuary from Elden region and the 6th dungeon in the game, and you can see here that it's sort of like a pillar with some lava flowing out, and then he's standing on one of those sun mosaics from the dungeon. You can also see we have True Master Sword, the belt, and just up there you can just see the Fire Shield earrings in there. But as I mentioned, this is obviously heavily inspired by Brixter, who did an amazing job coming up with the original design, and I absolutely love seeing figures at this scale. This is the first one I've ever built, first one I've ever really worked with. But I was really surprised by how sturdy, how functional, and how beautiful it looks, really. And most of the design here is the same. The only real bits that have changed is the head because of the hairstyle and then the hat. Obviously the sword, the colours, and there's a couple of, obviously, reworks on the inside of a torso, as he has not officially released instructions, so this build was entirely done by looking at the pictures he's posted and then going from there and sort of constructing it. So believe it or not, I have the Breath of the Wild one constructed in a studio file, and that's how I did this model. But I'm going to stop the spin and we'll take a closer look up at the model. So just quickly interjecting here, I thought I'd quickly show you the attachment points in detail. So here is that cheese slope mosaic, which I said I'll be doing an entirely separate video on, but it was just designed to be a nice looking base for Link. But we also have these attachment points here, which just sit into the mosaic, and that's what the back of his feet attach to, which I will show you now. Right, and here is the full Link model, and he's looking pretty rigid really at the moment, isn't he, like flat like this? But I thought I'd start out by just showing you a couple of the bits of articulation that we've got here. So as you can see, the head can swivel so he can look side to side. This was much better on the original model by Brixter, but because of the hat for this variant of Link, the design is a bit more impaired. But once you get it into position, you can snap that hat back together and he will still look in both directions. So there is looking to the right and there slightly to the left. This one's a bit more difficult, but there you go. You could also just take the head off, so if you wanted to do a game over, then I guess you could. I'm showing you this head in a bit more detail. Absolutely ingenious how this was designed. It took me a good couple of hours really to work out what he'd done here, but I won't spoil the secret, but absolutely incredible usage of pieces in here, particularly the handlebars that allow that earring piece just to show through there, if I can get some better lighting on it. Anyway, yeah, so I chose to go a bit simplistic with the hair. There were a couple of designs I went through, but in the end I chose dark tan and was extremely limited by the pieces available in dark tan. But the green hat just slopes down around the back to give you a full 360 coverage. Moving down, you can also see that I included the chainmail, this specific to the Skyward Sword and Twilight Princess variants of Mr. Link over here. I chose to ignore the belt going across the top because it was obstruction, and I ran out of corner slopes, or else I would have added some more kind of textures on this torso, but I really don't mind it. One thing I also looked into was just sort of changing the shaping, but you know, I think it works pretty well. Anyway, back to articulation. Like he mentions in his video, the shoulder joints are, oh wow, they're really special. I love using this bar element here, but these guys have just been sort of inserted in there, so it means you can get all types of rotation, more than even a human would. So you can go 360, up, down, and around, and then having the elbow joint here, and then a wrist joint also really help the movement and sort of giving him options with posability. And we did some amazing things with him, which you'll see in a couple of weeks' time of him in the garden. I'll put a couple of examples on the screen now. But yeah, you can really get some incredible poses and other ideas going on with this kind of figure. It really is amazing. Down here on the hand, you can see he's still got his little brown hand guard on, but you'll also notice the holes through his hands, and that allows him to hold all the accessories, so you could replace that if you wanted to. But as I mentioned, you can go arms up. The other one's the exact same, it's just a mirrored build. And you can see again, green with the chainmail layer underneath, the white shirt under that, and then like the wrist gauntlets and stuff as well. So that's all very cool, very accurate. I mentioned those fire shield earrings just poking through again. They look incredible. Would never have thought to even bother including those. But moving down to the belt, you can see the next point of main articulation is all around this hip here. Now, while we don't actually rotate in two separate pieces, what this allows for is a slight rotation at the hip, but then a further rotation so that it doesn't look quite as odd as turning by 90 degrees, but you can still get that wider range of motion, but through two turn points, which is really clever as well. And those are all done just with Technic pins. But if I just lift up the... Oh dear, we're falling apart. Oh no. Okay, we're back. If I lift up the sort of bottom of the tunic, and while the tunic isn't split into 5 segments, what we can see not only is how it's connected, which is, again, is a really clever method, but what we can do is, if they stay on for me, is we can pose the cloth elements at different levels so that when his leg is up, it looks like a natural flowing cloth rather than just a, oh, the whole thing is directly up at 90 degrees. It just looks slightly better like that. So it sort of flows across his body, which is really crazy to think about. And also, it's the same round the back there. And I would not blame the model for all these breakages that are happening. I'm having to hold this at a really rough angle for filming here because I want to show you hands-on, which is one thing I think is really important with a mock like this. Is while the camera work and he might fall apart a bit more, I think it's really important just to show you how he's holding in my hands rather than just at a distance on a spinny turntable, which we did earlier. But anyway, you can see the legs down here, which also have a fair range of articulation. We can go out to the side, we can go in, we can go up, we can go down. However, there is some limits there, and you can see there's this very clever knee design where when it's straight, it hides and the knee sort of locks, and you've just got this look there. But when it comes down, it doesn't look too bad either, and you've still got the full articulation. And also, technically, you could twist it at the knee as well, so you could angle the lower part of the leg outwards if you wanted to. And then down here at the feet, we've got not only some side to side, but we also have toes up and down, so he looks like he's on whatever surface. And also, more difficult to show, but you could actually twist the where the foot sits. So there we go. So if he was standing on a rock face, the foot could be upright and he could be leaning off to the side, which I think is another really simple but important touch. But anyway, that is all the posability on this guy. I've talked briefly throughout about the design process of how you transform something like this, but really all the credit for the design needs to go to Brixter. But I think I'm really pleased with how I was able to turn him into green. So without mentioning the base today, I think I'm going to bring in the accessories and show you what I did there. So first up is obviously going to be the Master Sword, and you may think, well, it's missing a part, isn't it? But we've got the bottom hilt element here, which is just a Lego crystal, and then the rest of the sword here built up with some of that new drum lacquered gold 1x1 tiles, a very long brick-built pillar, and a pointy element on the end, as well as some purple crenellations. It's a very simplified version of the Master Sword that I think suits the true Master Sword from Skyward Sword, but the reason it's split into two is obviously because of his hand, and let's see if he will behave. But what we do is we take his hand, insert the hilt into the bottom, so it looks like he's holding it, then put the other piece on the top, and that's where the handle is. It's in the middle, so his hand sort of is grasping around the sword, which is why you don't see the full finished image. So there's the Master Sword, but then we also have the shield. Now, Hylian shield I guess I could have done, but I think it would have looked too weird, too detailed at this scale. So I went through the Skyward Sword shield collection, and I settled across the Iron Shield, which I thought had a design which I could easily represent with triangle tiles and stuff. And that's what I did here. I'll put a reference up on the screen. Put a little handhold around the back, but in the end I decided against using the handhold, and I prefer to just take his hand, shove it up at, yes, what is a certain broken angle, and then attach the shield like that, which gives me way more options when it comes to actually like raising it up like it is a shield. The other way to do it is depending on the pose. If you flip his hand up the other way, like he's doing a stop sign, and then put it on there, the shield can no longer fall down, so it can sort of pose better. I'll show you an example of that in one of our garden photos on the screen. Okay, but if we wanted to do some other things, I took another look at the Skyward Sword catalogue of weapons, and I brought in two more. The first one of which is the Bugnet, which is probably the worst of the two designs, and you can see, like the Master Sword, we've got a handle for the bottom and a handle for the top, but it's basically just a large cone with some red and some Technic pins and lightsaber hilts that allow it to sort of flow and connect to a normal bar, and this works in a very similar way to the sword, where if we take that off his hand and bring it over here, stick the bar in halfway, kind of let it dangle for a bit, then grab the other bar and stick it in the bottom. Oh dear, we've broken him. This has never happened before. All these camera angles. Anyway, here we have the Bugnet, and it is perfectly attached to his hand. It stays upright, which is a shock for something so top heavy. It can move, so we can have it down at his side so that he's catching bugs, or upwards, like he's going out on his hunt. We could even throw it back over his shoulder. I guess we could possibly attach it to the back, like it was in his inventory, but the only real problem with this one is that we don't have a 4x4 cone to kind of like finish it off, or like a 2x4 cone, so this is less awkward. But either way, I think it looks good from quite a few of the angles, definitely not all of them, and I think he looks really cute while holding it as well. One other thing I suppose I should mention about the design is that I actually added eyes. This was something that brixter didn't do, and it definitely works better without eyes on Breath of the Wild Link, but I think here on Skyward Sword Link, eyes add all the difference. But one last item to take a look at now, if we just make his arms look a little less creepy while we're at it, is the beetle. And this is obviously a strange representation, just like the Hylian shield, which I chose not to do. I think the detail level really makes or breaks something like this, and I was concerned that it didn't look too good, but I think this is about as good as you'd get at the scale. So you've got the little wings on the top, the pincers, which can move in and out, and then sort of this sand green shell, which I was lucky to have elements for, really. But this works in a very similar way to the shield, where it attaches onto that stud, and then you can kind of aim it upwards like he's about to launch it, like you can see in this picture. Or you could put it down at his side, or you suppose you could even have it in the air on a transparent rod while Link's controlling it from the ground. So I think that's a really cool selection of items. But if you're interested more in the cheese slope mosaic and the designing of the base, I'm going to be doing a separate video on cheese slope mosaics, as well as an entire separate video for our photos that we took of Link in the garden, which I think is where he really does stand out. That as we finish off today, I'd like you guys to tell me what you think of this Green Link variant down in the comments below, as well as go give brixter some love. He did an amazing job with this, and I can tell you did a better job than this because I know his design did not have the problem that you've just seen on the screen, but that's what happens when you try and design sets without the instructions. I'm guilty of that, and I don't care. I think he looks great.
So, because my real life filming absolutely sucks, just as a bit of an extra look, I thought I'd bring you in here to studio just to see him one last time. There's not really anything new to point out. I'll go and show you that other one in just a second, but you can just see a bit of my design process. I did design this all in studio. You can just see the model, I guess. There were a couple of head variations. You can see the Master Sword and Shield. In fact, if I go and hide those, show them all, and then hide them again, you can see that I also have the bug and bug net over here as well. Yeah, so there's really nothing else to show you here. I mean, like his articulation, I guess. You can just about see how he's working, all the slopes and stuff. But let me talk briefly about the design process and the original design by brixter. And you can see here that it basically follows the exact same pattern. I didn't put the earrings in on this one. I got the accurate colors. This was the actual one I started with. I wanted to start with the actual one he did because I thought this was really cool. However, no offense to his, but I've ended up liking mine more, but maybe that's just because Breath of the Wild's only my second favorite Zelda game. But yeah, the design process was basically exactly the same as the other guy, except that this time I was working off his original images. Without all of his shots of Link being twisted and stuff, I'd never have worked out how the inside was done. But it's only because he showed all those different angles of him posed that allowed me to work out if the articulation is working like that. Well, then this is the answer. But the design is basically, well, not quite. It's almost a color swap, bar the head. The torso is basically a color swap. The arms were a color swap minus all of these little decorations meant to represent the stripes. I modified the bottom of the tunic because his green tunic has curves and then there's chainmail underneath, especially for Skyward Sword. Legs are an exact rip-off. Belt was modified to remove the Sheikah slate. And the basic idea of having the ears and the head were the same. However, the hats and hair were completely different. Accessories were all mine. Personally, his were probably better. I didn't have the pieces to do the bow, so I didn't. But I just thought I'd show you these designs nice and quick in studio, just to give you another close-up look. But besides that, I hope you enjoyed this small little look at the video. Watch out for a follow-up, as I've been doing some really nice photography with my Green Man. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.